these are going to form the basis of that 2x2 matrix and which we'll use to build our scenario planning. Here's a few guidelines for you to begin to identify the uncertainties that will formulate your matrix. You want to find the extremes between the top two uncertainties that will form the four possible scenarios in our 2x2 matrix. They will form the blueprint, which we'll use to portray the four likely scenarios that we're going to identify. And these scenarios will be used to help you think through how each uncertainty is likely to turn out in the context of the potential future. This is the foundation of our planning tool. Now it's time to build a grid. And using these top two uncertainties that cover a wide range of possibilities, we begin to think about what the potential industry changes could look like. What is this blueprint for the future that your scenario planning leads you to think about in the construction industry? Let's take a look at an actual scenario planning exercise that was done for the food industry. It compares the uncertainty of the agricultural output, thinking about the changes in the agricultural industry, what will happen to food output, and comparing that to consumer demands. And as you can see, those two axes really create four possible scenarios. A scenario of stagnation, one of balance, one of supply exclusivity, and one of global scarcity. You can see the range of examples that these 2x2 matrix provides for us. So as you can see, by putting together two top uncertainties, we're able to lay them together on different axes and develop a 2x2 matrix, which gives us four potential scenarios that we can develop with a wide range of possibilities. Why don't we spend a moment right now? We don't have the time to do the full exercise. But what I'd like you to do is take a moment, open up your leadership journal, and just sketch a little 2x2 matrix like that. And instead of the food industry, put your particular sector of your industry, line construction industry, specialty contractor, systems integration, whatever it is you're doing, mechanical contracting, whatever it is, put that in there and think about two big uncertainties and label them on each of the axes. Spend a moment now and see if you can identify those two top uncertainties and what they'd be if we were to develop these four possible scenarios. Were you able to identify two top uncertainties? Well, just as an example, some things that we talked about. Suppose we identified the financial investment in the construction industry in the next 5 to 10 years as an uncertainty, and we compared that to the availability of skilled labor, as we've talked about. You can see that if the money flew into the industry and the available labor didn't improve and stayed where it was or regressed, we'd have a really bad scenario. Tons of money, tons of demand for construction services, and no people. At the same time, possibly we could see a ton of people come in and no money. That'd be a scenario very different than many of us had thought about. Or maybe the scenario works out where the money and the advances in technology equal the new entrants to the workforce. Play around perhaps with the uncertainty of technology if you want in your industry. Robotics. Maybe you're a drywall contractor, and we saw in Foundation 3 the advanced use of robotics to install things like drywall. What if automation was to continue like that and labor supply or financial investment was another uncertainty? You play around with it, you begin to think about these uncertainties, and from it, by using this 2x2 matrix, you're able to envision four potential scenarios. Now, the real work starts after you've identified these four areas to start building the narrative. What would happen if there was unlimited money flowing into the construction industry and there were no people available? And then you begin to play off what you know about and what your data tells you about the construction industry and what that would look like. So just so you understand, this scenario planning exercise is used widely by a large number of companies. I mentioned Shell and the oil companies. Many companies are using scenario planning, and there is empirical research to support it. Here's one that looks at the construction industry through the lens of information technology based on the year 2030. I know some of you work in that space, and this might be something you're interested in taking a look at, but understand that this is an empirical method to try to build these future scenarios of what the world, in this case, the construction industry, could look like in the year 2030. So let's just recap a couple points about these uncertainties. Do they cover a wide range of possibilities? In order to allow for a future that we don't know about, we want to make sure that we don't get it too narrowly defined. We want the extremes capable on our 2x2 matrix. Do they show diverse viewpoints? Is the scenario planning internally consistent? It has to be internally consistent, has to be feasible. It doesn't have to be a prediction, as we've talked about, but you've got to be working off of scenarios that are internally consistent. They're plausible enough to be taken seriously. Certainly, this dichotomy between technology and number of entrants into the industry is one that I think is important, and certainly one that can be taken seriously. Additionally, do they address important causal connections? The amount of money and the labor supply. That's an important causal connection that could dramatically change our industry. And finally, do they stimulate the search for alternative opportunities? Based on that, we want to begin to think about, if these two scenarios come forward, we have tons of money flowing and not many people, what does that mean? What does that mean for our work practices? What does that mean for the way we design and install our systems? So if we look, this is the kind of 5 steps that we've identified. We started with our industry analysis and time frame. We talked about those industry forces that are present in there. We then tried to distinguish between trends and uncertainties, recognizing that there's a little bit of a gray area there. Step 4, we went to build our 2x2 matrix, working off those 2 uncertainties, and we used that kind of range of the 2x2 matrix to build a blueprint for our scenarios. Once we've done that, we build out our narrative and spend time based on those assumptions thinking about what the world could look like. That should give us 4 potential scenarios about our future vision for the construction industry as it relates to our specific sector. And now we move to the final step. We've got to deploy and monitor what we think might happen. Remember, as we've discussed, the goal now is advanced recognition of the potential scenarios that we've identified in our 2x2 matrix. We're not trying to predict the future. We're trying to think about it ahead of time. And in doing so, it cues us in to be more dialed into our environment as we begin to approach the world and the uncertainty that we live in. In many ways, it reminds me of the post-mortem exercise. Remember after action reviews? And we said the problem with the post-mortem was somebody has to die. And we said, instead of a post-mortem, let's think about a pre-mortem before we start the job. What will we be talking about? And in essence, scenario planning is a pre-mortem. It's a pre-mortem on the future. You're creating these visions, these potential scenarios of what could happen when these 2 uncertainties come together in various permutations and combinations.